Whew, man, it's been too long. Greeting, bones and ghouls. It's time to immerse the Sims after so long. I've been itching to talk about this game skin deep, and based on all the comments I've got from you guys over the last couple of months, you guys are all itching to see my video about it. Real quick, I want to say thank you for all of your patience. I meant to have this video out well over a week ago, but life had other plans, particularly my GPU going and needing to get it RMA'd, which left me working on other stuff. But we're here now, and that's what matters. Before we get into a primer on Skin Deep, though, I gotta check something. This is actually my second time recording this video because this is a clean install of my computer, and I forgot to fix the noise gate settings. Tried this once, but I had dinner. Holy shit! Okay, no tugging at the button. Can I sit down with it buttoned? I can still sit down with the original jacket buttoned. We are officially back. Hell yeah. I'm really happy that I was able to do that with a full meal in me. As a quick primer, Skin Deep is a stealth action immersive sim created by one Blendo Games, who made something called Quadrilateral Cowboy, which I gotta be honest, that's the first time I ever heard about it was you guys telling me about Skin Deep and how they're the guys that made Quadrilateral Cowboy. Man, if I could say quadrilateral like correctly once, that would be pretty cool. It is now made by Blendo and produced by Annapurna Interactive. You play as one Nina Pasadena, who is a cat insurance commando. Essentially, in the spacefaring reality that Skin Deep takes place in, cats are fully sentient and seem to be the upper echelon of society. However, that comes with the downside of being frequently attacked and captured by pirates. Nina is the one who the insurance agency calls when they need someone to resolve one of those piracy situations. Her first goal is to rescue and exfil all the cats on a boarded vessel, and then after that, it's up to her how she does her work. Part of that is letting the dogs out for some reason, despite all other humans in this game wearing shoes. She just never bothers with them, even in later missions, despite like half of my injuries in this game being from walking on broken glass. I think I should stop thinking about this. The gameplay in Skin Deep is first and foremost a stealth action game, and yes, also an immersive sim, but we'll get to that later. Every mission starts with you in a little bitty pod carrying no equipment, but you are given the option to peek out of a little window before infiltrating to check for patrol patterns or somewhere that might have something useful for you right out of the literal gate. Your MO is to rescue the cats and then later sneak out yourself through the reinforcement barge that the space pirates send in once the cats have been exfilled. You don't have to do the reinforcement section for like the first few levels, but once you start, the reinforcement section can be like a third to up to half of your mission, depending on how fast you go through like the base mission. Stealth involves a lot of sneaking around, obviously, which involves a lot of using the high ground outside of the sightlines of the enemy pirates, the ventilation system, or just going out the airlock and in through the garbage chute to entirely get around certain rooms. Be careful if you do that last one though, because you will literally leave stinky clouds wherever you go that make it very easy to track you down. Good thing there are showers, deodorant sticks, and even some air fresheners if you're feeling desperate on most ships. You can ghost these missions if you want, but most likely you're going to need to set up takedowns for guards patrolling areas you really don't want them to be in, and that involves finding a way to stun them and then riding them like a Left 4 Dead 2 jockey, making sure that they smash into enough things to knock them out. Don't worry, you don't kill anyone in this game, as all the baddies conveniently have this thing called a skull saver on them that ejects their head from their shoulders in the event of a critical body error. You're going to need to grab those saved skulls if you want to permanently deal with a pirate though, as eventually they'll just float off to the nearest respawn point where they get a fresh body. Worse yet, on top of a skull saver taking up a spot in your very limited inventory, if you have them equipped, they will just straight up start screaming. And even then, like if they're like in another slot, they'll still like make muffled noises, just doing anything they can to try and get the attention of their fellow pirates. So you better deal with them fast. Speaking of being alerted to your location, your enemies are smart. Ish. If they notice that something's weird, they'll call it in, and then everyone will need to do a check-in. You'll need to use one of their own walkie-talkies or the PA microphone on the ship's bridge to call in and pretend to be one of the guards that you've removed from their patrol, or else they'll notice that guard isn't checking in and they'll sound the alarm. This can be real inconvenient because a walkie-talkie will have only 3 charges on it, so you better be near that PA microphone if you've taken out a lot of dudes and one of the remaining dudes notices something weird. Or, you can always just intentionally let them raise the alarm, only to use one of those limited walkie-talkie charges to call off the alarm 10 seconds later. It's your call. You permanently deal with pirates by launching their heads into space by one means or another. The trash chute is always a handy option, but often that's locked up until you remove the jammers on them, and then you'll have to settle for a few one-time use toilets in the meantime, which, even as the characters say, is probably the low point in their career. Later in the game, you'll have the option to straight up space the pirates right out of an airlock, but that's a very situational, albeit very satisfying takedown. Windows work too, but those are also locked down at the start of missions. If you want to clear a ship, you're gonna need to get those trash chutes accessible again, which leads us to disabling security. Most levels will start with absolutely everything on lockdown. The airlocks, the windows, the ventilation system, trash chutes, and even doors will have specific keys on them, leading to everything being barricaded. And to unlock these things, you're going to need to disable each of the jammers, preventing you from activating the fuse breakers on those ship systems, or find the corresponding key on one of the bad guys. Each of these will work on a password system that operates on a pre-smartphone style keypad. These passwords are always laying around somewhere on the ship, and you're going to need to find them because there's no hacking of any kind. Asterisk, there's no hacking minigame. You can't just respawn spam either once you find out the passwords, because while the codes themselves seem to be the same on each level, the particular code gets randomized each mission start, like where it's hidden and which code will unlock which jamming system. And I'm actually kind of thankful that Skin Deep spared us a tedious hacking minigame. There is hacking, it's just done through a very hard to find item called a hack grenade, which you should really save those for the auto turrets or other important things. Speaking of those turrets, hacking the turrets that otherwise Swiss cheese you is a great way to clear a room real fast if you can pull it off. It is the most effective form of out loud violence in the game, and it's actually more of a stealth feature. Going loud can be done in Skin Deep. Can. But it's rather unfulfilling. There are 3 kinds of firearms in Skin Deep, one of which being the shotgun, which only appears in the cat rescue pod and I think in very special circumstances on certain levels. And then there is the pistol and the machine gun, which you can find during the first part of a mission, but ammo for them is so scarce in that first part that they cannot be relied upon to try and play fully loud until you get to that escape pod and maybe get some ammo for them. If they have ammo for the weapon you found, that is. Heck, you're lucky if there's even ammo in a gun at all if you find one. The only time you're going to find enough ammo for a full magazine is probably going to be in that rescue pod, which is presumably right before you're getting into the big loud extraction fight. I hope you found a duplicator ray and saved those charges on it, because while you can use them, you're not going to get enough ammo from the escape pod pack to get more than one full magazine. When you can use guns and you have enough ammo to use guns, they kill quick. But firefights can get clunky as the game insists on showing you an action cam cutaway almost every time someone gets separated from their shoulders in a method that requires extremeness, which gets especially jarring when you're trying to use the machine gun to deal with several pirates in rapid succession or trying to use the shotgun at all. I found that I'd take a guy out, it'd cut to the action cam, and then it would go on for just long enough for me to forget that I manually need to rack shells with a separate button, and then I get flatlined after 5 seconds of awkwardly mashing left click, realizing that I missed a step in how to use gun. I think that's more of a me problem though. Okay, so your access to guns is limited, and when you do have them, they're not the smoothest experience. But can you give guys a good smackdown in a desperate situation? No. You do have the option to use anything you're currently holding to do a little melee bash attack. I believe this is primarily because a certain item you can obtain, the power conduit, can begin to arc when bashed against something, meaning that if you throw it at a flammable source while it is arcing, it will ignite it. But you can also do that by just lighting a lighter and tossing that. You can also break windows to depressurize a room. But look at this thing, doesn't it look like it'd be such a nice tool to give someone a good bonk? Well, unfortunately it isn't. The range of the bash is so comically short that if you try sneaking up on someone, you're more likely to accidentally physically bump into them and get discovered before you can give them a good whack. On top of that, there seems to be no bonus for taking someone by surprise with a melee weapon, and aside from one exception, bashing someone with a held object will do only 1 tick of damage. The only exception to this is the swordfish blade, which you can only get by causing an alarm to go off and then finding a way to destroy the swordfish drone that's summoned. Most likely you'll be pulling that blade out of your own body. Swordfish blades will do 3 ticks of damage, which can also be done by chucking the blades at someone, so there's little point in doing direct melee. There's also the issue that all items that can potentially damage someone have durability, and the swordfish blade crumbles to dust after 1 use. Most other items get 3, and if I remember my first grade level math, that means that a swordfish blade is technically only as effective as any other item in the game that you can hit someone with, because they all usually have 3 durability. And 1 damage times 3 durability tokens means 3 damage, which just so happens to be the same as the swordfish blade. Also, 3 damage does not incapacitate any enemies in this game. Hey y'all, I'm going to record a quick addendum / correction here because I was reviewing my footage very closely because this just kind of didn't seem like it added up. And what I found is that, for one, it turns out that the sword knife, that is what it's called, can do up to 5 damage upon like hitting someone with it. Just that's still not nearly enough to take out any enemy in this game. And additionally, it turns out I was also wrong about durability on weapons because I reviewed 2 like attempts I did at out loud combat scenarios, and while yeah, your best bet is going to be trying to instigate with a sword knife, I can't get over that name, it turns out that anything that is not explicitly meant to be used as a melee weapon just instantly breaks the second you use it. So you still only do 1 tick of damage when you bash somebody with something, but it'll just instantly disappear. You just get that 1 tick. So yeah, I guess technically the sword knife does a much better job at trying to fight people. However, I noticed in this next clip where I also tried to instigate with a sword knife that it also turns out that if you throw anything that is not meant to be explicitly thrown at someone, it doesn't matter its durability, it just instantly breaks. You still only get 1 tick of damage, and whatever that item is, it's gone. And I guess part of the reason why I didn't initially notice this, despite taking notes and like being in the moment with the game, is because they make it so hard to get close to people to do damage to them, and the only time you're really going to be that close to like melee an enemy is likely when you've already stunned them with a banana peel or like a box of pepper, and at that point you're just going to be pouncing on them anyway. So you very rarely actually get a chance to do melee, and when you do get to do that melee, it feels like everything in this game is discouraging you from trying to do that, despite like having actual built-in stats for it. It's just so confusing because ironically, this is a game that gives you an event log of every little thing that has ever happened during your mission, but also some things are just the way the game is made are so heavily discouraged that like it feels different when you do it versus like when you're looking back, carefully reviewing footage to make sure everything's right. And I have to admit, I got confused here, but I guess I'm still like sticking to my thesis here of, oh yeah, melee is heavily discouraged and nearly impossible to do. Or if anything that's not intended as a way to take out an enemy is heavily discouraged and nearly impossible to do. I don't think I ever got through a melee or throwing things at people situation where I did not get downed while going one-on-one with an enemy and just barely surviving. On the note of throwing things that do not immediately stun enemies, they can be used to damage enemies, but you are far better off not doing that, but instead throwing an object away from an enemy to distract them. Because again, excepting the swordfish blade, getting hit by an object only does 1 damage, and frankly, unless an object is intended to be thrown, the throwing is a bit wonky with the impacts. I often found myself thinking I'd be smart by taking out a security camera by chucking something at it, but then despite the trajectory preview showing up and looking like it's okay, it would bounce off the camera at an awkward angle, doing no damage to the camera itself, and then usually landing right in the camera's detection zone, raising the alarm. Oops. The only things that are effective to throw are things that are intended to be thrown. Stun items like ragweed, soap, and banana peels. Distraction items like cat toys. And grenades. Grenades can be used in the middle of combat if you find yourself with a half-second breather where you can equip it and then line up your throw, but often you're going to be best suited using them to either initiate combat or to instantly take out one guy who's by themselves at the cost of most likely triggering an alarm. One thing that I'll give Loud Combat credit for is that they do a solid job with firearm mechanics. Not only can you reload your gun manually, but you can also inspect your magazine to see how many rounds it has left inside of it, check the chamber to see if there is a round in it, then you can chamber a round if there is not one, and if it's already chambered, you accidentally eject a round that you need to put back into the magazine. All guns have magazines that are easy to read, and Skin Deep does not use a single UI element-based ammo tracker because everything you need to know about the weapon in your hands can be learned by visually inspecting it. Oh yeah, we gotta rescue those cats. They're all put into little cages throughout the vessel they're on, and you gotta find a key to get each of them out. You don't need to match up the keys to the cages because any will do, and there are plenty of ways to get them. Usually. Cat keys are usually on the person of a pirate, and since ghosting is an option in Skin Deep, you can just pick it off their pockets, which requires you to stay close to the pirate in question for a few seconds and hover over the item you want to snag. Enemies will get suspicious immediately after you do this, but tend not to have the common sense to look directly behind them. However, I prefer ways of getting the keys that also make sure there isn't a pirate still walking around to complicate my plans. Cats also don't take up any inventory space and don't make any noise once they're out of the bag, or the cage I guess, so there's no consideration to be made about timing aside from can I get in, free the cat, and get out without dying. Once you've got them all, you've got to get out of the ship and use a signal device to call down an escape pod, and don't worry, they are extremely abundant. This is where we get to the weakest part of each level, the extraction. You don't even have to do these the first few levels, and frankly, in hindsight after playing the whole game, it might have been a better idea if there was a way to, like, say if you perfectly ghosted a level, reinforcements simply just wouldn't come. You go inside these little kitty escape pods where you'll get a random assortment of overtly for combat items, usually a gun with 2 units of ammo and a few explodey things. These are random every time, and I did catch myself reloading saves until I got TNT, because the TNT pack in this game is a delayed I win button. One thing is more than enough to insta-jib an entire reinforcement squad, but if you get lucky enough to have 2 packs of TNT in your escape pod, it is almost impossible to not clear out the entire squad before they leave the room they boarded into. During the tutorial for extraction, they explained that once the pirate reinforcements come in, you gotta either steal the key to access a ship off the person of one of the pirates, or dispose of them all. I only ever stole the key once on the very last level, just to see if anything different happened, and the answer is no. The last thing I'll say in the playing gameplay portion of this video is that the level design is great. So great it almost covers for how repetitive the game is level to level. I'm well aware that Skin Deep is running on a very old engine, id 4, as the game straight up tells you that at the end, and that maybe this is a limitation of that engine, but there's only so much you can do with levels as relatively small as they are. To Skin Deep's credit though, they are doing everything you can possibly do with the amount of space that they are given. Most missions will have an unlisted secondary objective that you gotta find, such as relighting a lighthouse to get more supplies, or building a mech that is like the only time Loud Combat is fun. You get a superlative at the end of the mission if you do these, but they're never told to you right off the bat, and they're things that you gotta find through exploring and finding notes. That being said, there's only so much you can do when every level is a small vertical environment where you start with nothing and need to systemically sneak your way through the rafters, unlocking more methods of travel as you go until you have freedom of movement and start picking off the baddies one by one, or slipping past them quietly to free the cats. Speaking of freeing the cats, I got the door, don't worry. There you go. You can be free. Embrace your freedom. Oh, he's staring at the door like, well, now I don't want to. And then you go loud. Like, no matter what. Like when the pirate reinforcements show up, like, I guess you can try to sneak their access keys, but at that point it's like, oh, you are given a machine gun and a bunch of shaped charges. Like, these shaped charges insta-jib everything in the room, so why bother continuing to sneak? My favorite level in the whole game ended up being the one at the very end, mainly because it broke most of these conventions. The algae farm was much larger than other levels in the game, or at least it felt much larger, and as a bonus didn't have an auto map or those info boxes that literally tell you the exact position of every object worth noting in the level, which meant I actually had to explore the level, checking for points of reference and memorizing enemy patrols and how many enemies were in each room, and find the few maps that were posted around the area. I had to learn things. It also wasn't just a slam dunk to find one of those maps, since the way the level layers on top of itself makes it very hard to see exactly where you are on a 2D map of a very 3D space, and I'm fairly certain that was very much intentional. This was definitely my favorite level on the merit that it just did something slightly different from all the other levels, even if it was such a simple change. It very much feels like Blendo games can make all kinds of cool levels, but perhaps they're being held back by engine limitations or maybe just a lack of manpower. I don't know, I did not make this game myself. But Charles, I hear you say, what about the box stacking? Well, in a literal sense, there wasn't any actual stacking of boxes, but there are plenty of imsim elements in Skin Deep. Skin Deep is very much Thief inspired. Heck, the Dark mod is listed in the credits. It's a really fleshed out stealth game where you can distract people with sounds or manipulate the world into making traps for your enemies. There is no one way about beating each mission, however you will notice that a lot of ways that you can do things kind of fold into each other. This is less a problem with the imsiminess of Skin Deep and more about something I'm gonna get to right now. Or in a sec, you get what I mean. We're in the section for Immersive Sim stuff. Skin Deep does make a big effort to have a lot of imsim-y stuff and many options on how you want to play each level, but a lot of that in the not stealth category just kind of falls flat. We already talked at length about how violence being an option is not a very good option, and there are very little options for subterfuge, with the walkie-talkie call-in thing being essentially it with no dialogue tricks or other sort of, shenanigans, unless you want to count the snarky email responses you can send to the cats between missions as dialogue choices. This is less of a problem of if Skin Deep is or is not an immersive sim, but more of a problem that happens when you make a game that is stealth first. In order to keep your players doing the stealth, which is where you put the most effort into your game, you have to make sneaking around either massively overpowered, which Skin Deep does kind of feel like a little easy, maybe also because I immediately after playing Skin Deep started playing Dishonored on a harder difficulty, but it's not broken. You'll still get caught if you are not being careful. And I think this is more the other case where they're just kind of nerfing or outright omitting other options. Yeah, the attention to details on the guns is great, and I always appreciate when a game lets me do stuff like check the chamber in the magazine, but I'm also well aware that your access to guns seems to be heavily limited, very much on purpose. That purpose might just be that if you were able to have more access to guns, especially early on, you'd be able to just run around shooting people, which negates the need to sneak around. Nita needs to have glass bones and paper skin, because if she was able to hold her own for a straight up fight, even against a single lower tier enemy, then that would potentially lead to the player to go away from stealth and instead selectively picking fights until they've cleared the ship. Skin Deep is definitely putting in the effort to be an immersive sim, but held back by long-standing issues with stealth-focused games. This is not exactly a new problem, and stealth-centric games have been trying everything to balance out mechanics without accidentally leading the player to abandon the set of mechanics they worked on the most for something more simple and straightforward, like shooting everyone in sight and then turning off the alarm once everyone's dead. Thief tried making enemies in some areas so tough that Garrett's arsenal didn't have an immediate means to deal with them, or just having the mission themselves specifically require, hey, you're not allowed to kill anyone. And also, Garrett wasn't exactly Doom guy as far as the fortitude department went. Dishonored tried tying the use of carnage-heavy abilities to a morality system that gave you the bad ending if you killed too many people, meaning you could play with all the cool toys, but you would be scolded at the end for doing too much murder, among other setbacks, such as the high chaos rating, meaning that more enemies will spawn in levels, and you'll get certain story setbacks before the end of the game too. More recent stealth-centric imsims, such as Amnesia the Bunker and Stay Out of the House, have opted for, rather than making the player weaker than expected for a video game protagonist, they make the antagonist something that, for one, is strong and quite a challenge to confront in the first place, but also something you are not able to permanently deal with. So that's something that, like, you're far better off either eluding or straight up trying to find ways to bamboozle them, such as fooling Jimbles over here in Amnesia the Bunker into smashing through obstacles for you so you can get in and out of certain areas much quicker, meaning you use much less of your precious fuel keeping the lights on while you complete objectives. This is an issue that stealth-centric immersive sims have been trying to find a solution for geez, close to 30 years now. Skin Deep's own problems with how do you balance the opportunity for combat in a stealth immersive sim without invalidating stealth are nothing new. That being said, there are plenty of other things that potentially create more player freedom, but I often found myself feeling like I was being told that I had to color inside the lines. I can't duplicate a duplicator if I have two of them, but I will get a cheeky superlative at the end of the first mission that it's possible to, like, try that in. I can't try to target baddies I see with weapons first to try and get some firepower to help with the rest of the level, because their weapons just sort of cease to exist when they're down, or at least I can never find them after I took them down. The few elements I can exploit feel like they were specifically designed to be exploited, and now that I say that out loud, is something really being exploited if it was designed to be exploitable, or is that just being, like, used within its intended scope? Like, the best example I can think of off the top of my head on my script I conveniently have here is the one mission where you can essentially operate a drive-thru like a fast food employee and you get a bunch of free items, and I just kept doing that until I was armed to the teeth and could play however I wanted. There's no way around the jamming devices that are blocking off certain parts of a level except for the intended ways of finding a code wherever it's hidden and putting it in. Although, scratch that or asterisk, I think you might be able to use the hack grenades on jammers, but I never did that because hack grenades are so rare that using them on the jammer would be a huge waste, especially when you know you can find the code for them probably somewhere in the room. It is also very hard to disable security camera without accidentally triggering an alarm like I mentioned earlier with the throwing things, and you'll often find yourself doing what the game wants you to do, which is to either avoid them altogether, burn one of your precious hack grenades to take one over, which would also be wasteful again, because doing whatever you need to do to unlock the ventilation system will lead you to the service access area where you literally just push a button and the camera turns to your side. That is a nice thing to have though. They kind of work like Payday 2 cameras where once they're yours, they'll tag patrolling bad guys through walls for you. What's worse on the please color inside of our lines front is that later on the game starts throwing lots of heavy enemies at you, which on top of having about double the HP pool of normal baddies, they are now immune to most normal ways that you have been taught to deal with them. You can stun them with things like ragweed and banana peels, but you can't pounce on them and jockey them down like other enemies. They are also immune to getting spaced for some reason, be it through damaging the airlock or breaking a window, and they're so bulky that the only ways to take them down in a fight is if you are at the very end of the level and you get a shotgun in the escape pod, or maybe an SMG if you found one and got lucky and you're okay with mag dumping a couple guys through a bunch of kill cams, or sneaking around them. But it feels like maybe the game was getting fed up with my violent shenanigans and is trying to politely but firmly remind me that this is supposed to be a stealth game and that I need to sneak past the guards. Ironically, this ended up corralling me into taking them all down in one very specific way, which was to ignore them until I found a hack grenade, use the hack grenade on one of the auto turrets, and then lure them over to the auto turret's aggro range by snapping my fingers and throwing stun objects at them until the turret could slowly chip away their HP pool. And then I kept repeating that until all the heavies on the level were dealt with. Of course, there's all the other little things we associate with box stackers, except for, well, the box stacking part. I'm pretty sure half the footage you're seeing here is of me creeping through the ventilation systems, and it's a nice touch that they make it to where you can't stay inside of vents forever because there's dust inside of them, and that's going to make you sneeze and reveal your position. The baddies can and will flush the whole ventilation system to force you out if they know that you're in there. There's thrown objects as a distraction and flushable toilets. Heck, the flushable toilets are part of the early gameplay loop. The number 451 is part of one of the missions, and yes, there are plenty of basketball hoops to try and sink a three-pointer from. Skin Deep is definitely an immersive sim, even if it is one that really wants you to favor stealth. It's got all the trappings, and while there is an effort to make you color inside the lines, you can still get creative with your tools that the game gives you, and there is never truly one way to deal with a situation. I wish it did let me create a bit more chaos with the tool sets it offers, because especially towards the later missions, I found myself doing increasingly samey strategies. Okay, let's get out of our chairs and do a bit of cooking. I've had a lot of downtime lately waiting for my GPU to get replaced, so I've been filming and cooking a lot of segments. The first of which I let you all vote on, is my current meal prep chicken and rice. This is gonna be easy, like insanely easy. The prep time for this is less than 20 minutes, and most of that is just waiting for the salt to do salt things. Rev up those crock pots. Okay, the first thing we're gonna do here is acquire the chicken. I personally keep a little document in my phone's notes app where I keep track of all the prices of chicken breast from various stores, and the happy middle ground between quality of meat versus price seems to be the stuff at Costco that's in the fridge tubs, not the frozen stuff. The frozen stuff is pumped up with a lot of broth or whatever, and based on that, you're getting only about 8.5 pounds of chicken and 1.5 pounds of chicken broth. And that's just gonna drain out while you cook, and it's gonna make it real rubbery. The only exception to this is once a month or so, Kroger stores will have a buy one, get one free special on Tyson chicken breast, which then the name brand stuff goes from the most expensive non-organic chicken to the cheapest. It's best to do your shopping by going to your grocery store first to check if that sale's on, and then if it's not, get your chicken at the Costco or other warehouse store. Once the breasts have been acquired, we're gonna lay them all out on a paper towel lined sheet pan and liberally salt them on both sides. And now we wait 15 to 20 minutes, but if you really want, you can go as long as an hour. What we're doing here is not much about seasoning, but more about removing all the excess waters and potential fillers from the chicken breast, which is going to go a long way in keeping the final product moist and easy to chew on. Now, before we get into the crock pot stuff, there's one more very important thing we gotta do. Use some more paper towels to gently pat off any moisture pooling at the top of the chicken breast, and then weigh them out a second time. You're gonna notice that this is not nearly the same weight as was on the label when you bought it, maybe even over 1 pound lighter. Well, that's because we just sapped all the fillers out. Do yourself a favor and write down the actual weight of all your chicken, and then either divide up how much you want per portion or how many portions you feel like making. Either or works, but it's best to do this before you do anything else, because that way you can either plan on how many portions of everything else you're going to need to make, or how much room you need to set aside for the chicken and each amount of the set portions that you want to make. You get what I'm talking about. More on storing portions at the end. Alright, once we've done some elementary school division, we can start cooking this sucker. We're gonna do a simple marinade, which is literally just 1 bottle of chicken marinade of your choice, and then 1 cup of your preferred hot sauce. I'm doing a bottle of Stubbs and 1/2 cup of Frank's Red Hot. This is meant to be a base to make your chicken, not dry out and give it some basic flavor. If you wanna add some baby steps for making it more flavorful, I'd suggest starting with some healthy shakes of garlic powder, cracked pepper, and oregano. Whisk it all together, and then pour just a little bit onto the bottom of your crock pot, and then add a layer of your chicken breast, and then use just enough of your marinade to cover that, and keep repeating until you run out of both chicken and marinade. Cover that crock pot and set it to low for 6 hours. We'll do some more stuff to it later, but first we gotta cook it nice and slow. Well, how about everything else in the meantime? Well, rice is gonna be laughably easy. It's like rice is real easy to cook. Figure out how much you want per portion, and then just cook it according to the instructions on the bag, or what your rice cooker says if you've got one. One thing I've been doing lately is trying to be better about fully rinsing my rice, and I found a good way to do that is to get a mesh strainer like the one you'd use to sift flour, pouring your rice into that, and then running it under the sink for a couple minutes, maybe giving it a good shakety shake to make sure it's not clumping. Maybe have a glass or something at the bottom of your sink that you can occasionally fill with a runoff to see if it's turning clear. Once your rice is good to cook, do it however you cook rice. I've got my rice cooker here, but this was like the pricey one you see at Costco, which I got as a gift. And I understand fancier stuff like that might be a hard sell for y'all right now. It's times are tough. I use it a lot more than I use my air fryer, oddly enough, and it's pretty handy. It's kind of a set it and forget it type thing. Oh yeah, we gotta add veggies. Just pick your favorite kind of steam in bag veggies and microwave them. No, really, with stuff like meal prep, you have to eliminate any excess work, or else it's gonna be a huge chore and you won't want to do it, so you'll stop. And that just leads to you just hitting the dry drive-thru again. Meal prep needs to be cheap enough to excuse it, tasty enough to where you actually want to eat it, and easy enough to do regularly. Do yourself a favor now, and since there's probably still a good 5 hours and change on your chicken, portion out the rice and veggies into your containers and throw them in the fridge once they're done being steaming hot. That way, when the chicken's done, literally all you need to do is add it to the portions and you're done. And hey, look at that! Through the power of video editing, the crockpot timer is up and the chicken is done. Or is it? Okay, this has been cooking slowly but surely for a while, and we need to let it rest. Make sure the crock pot is off, and not on the keep warm setting, and partially uncover the lid. We're gonna let that chicken cool down for 20 to 30 minutes before we do anything to it. The stoneware of a crock pot is very thick, even when compared to cast irons and Dutch ovens, so it'll take a long time for the chicken to rest and get cool enough to work with. Once that time's up, now we're gonna take a couple of forks and start gently pulling the chicken apart. This will take maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and don't worry about getting every last meat fiber separated, because whatever isn't pulled apart by the time you're done here is gonna come apart when you portion it out. But we're gonna give it at least another 15 minutes to rest, like just cover it and let it sit. Why? Because marinades and such are known to only penetrate about the first millimeter or so of the surface area of any meat you're marinating. That's why it makes so little sense to do overnight marinades. However, when we increase the surface area of the meat by cooking it slow and then pulling it apart to its bare fibers, there's a lot more surface area and therefore the marinade gets to flavor a lot more chicken. After about 15 to 20 minutes of soaking, get your portioned meal prep containers out, put them on a food scale, and start weighing out the chicken for each one. You should be able to use the numbers you originally determined when you weighed out the de-waterified meat, and should all add up, because not only did we account for the moisture that would have been sapped out during the cooking process, but we also added more moisture in the form of the marinade to offset anything else that got sapped out. Don't forget to use every bit of what we cooked here by taking the juices that are left over in the crock pot and pouring them over the chicken to keep these things nice and juicy. Now, if they're still hot to the touch, give them some more time to cool, and then put them all in the fridge for a bit to fully cool down. Then, once they're all cooled down, like maybe set a 1-hour timer on your phone, leave only what you are intending to eat in the next 48 to 72 hours inside of the fridge, and then move everything else into the freezer. We're mainly putting everything in the fridge first after it's already cooled down a bit, because you don't want to put still hot things in your freezer, because when you put a bunch of hot things in a cold place, it kind of preemptively melts all the stuff in the cold place, and you really don't want that. Then, whenever you take out a portion of the fridge to eat later in the week, take one of the portions that is now safely frozen in the freezer and put it into the fridge, so that by the time you eat the other portions, and you keep doing that, the last one you put in is good and thawed and ready to eat. This meal is great for not only being an easy to take and heat wherever meal, but it also works great as a base for other meals too. You see, this is a very lean meal thanks to using the crock pot and a rice cooker, 2 tools which require no cooking fats. Our marinade here was also very low calorie. What I like to do is, if I'm low on fats for a day, I'll add stuff like a couple fried eggs for protein and fat, or even some guacamole for healthy fats too. I mean, look at this thing once it's all decked out. It's like if Chipotle made breakfast bowls and their portions were still good. And you can get 5 of these meals for a single Chipotle bowl probably. I have to be honest, I haven't checked the prices on those in a long time, and frankly, I am too scared to do so. But for reference, each of these meals comes to about $3 to $4 each, depending on how many portions you make. Now, I usually have the full recipes for my cooking segments for the $5 tier patrons and up, but you might have noticed that I've been using a lot of overt measurements for this video. I'm making the full recipe and the standalone cooking segment for this free to all over on the Patreon, since not only has it been a while since I've done one, but also I want to keep something like eating healthier accessible to all, and stick it to all those meal delivery services as a nice bonus. You can always still support me over on patreon.com/charlatanwonder, but I'm also going to try something new. YouTube's got this new YouTube shopping thing now, and I'm going to highlight a couple of tools I use each video that I think are essential to cooking. I'm still going to keep my no tools over $50 rule, and I've got 2 for you today: the crock pot and the food scale. Both of these are essential for meal prepping, and you can get an insane amount of mileage out of both of these. Things and that's even if you're not trying to use them to eat healthier. The ones I've listed here are what I think are the modern models of what I have now, because both the tools I used in this video are from my very first apartment, which makes them well over 10 years old. I even checked the manufacturer manufacturer's website for my food scale and it isn't even listed anymore. You don't need to get either of these through me if you don't want to. In fact, I'd suggest that if you want a crock pot, before going through this link, which I believe is an affiliate link, yeah, I think that's the right term, go check your local thrift stores first, as crock pots are the most abundant cooking tool there, and they are dirt cheap secondhand. Like, I've never not seen a crock pot at any thrift store I have ever been to. I've also made a point to include both the modern versions of the food scale I used, like if you want to save a few bucks by getting the plain metal one instead of this fancy black one. Now let's get back to Skin Deep. If I had to pick one word that describes the overall feel of this game, it would be lopsided. Yeah, it's solidly made for the most part and has writing that's competent, but the more I played it, the more I noticed that certain things got a lot more attention than other stuff, like just how much writing there is for a game of such a relatively small size. Well, features you'd expect from an immersive sim, or any type of game for that matter, just aren't there. And when you get to the opening credits of this game after a few missions, it's literally right in front of you. This is a game with 10 writers and a total of 4 programmers, and that's counting the 2 dedicated programmers plus 2 major leads who also did a bit of programming, as it seems that the leads in Skin Deep wear a lot of hats. More power to you. You just gotta get games made. Now, I don't know why they chose to show you this so early on, aside from having a cool aesthetic introduction where there are more guns than you actually get to use throughout the entire game, because if anything, the game's own opening credits are misleading. When you finally get to the end credits, it clarifies that each of these smaller writers were mainly responsible for one string of emails from each of the cats that you rescue, which I started out as reading through all of them, then skimming, and eventually I got to the point where, yeah. Back to the game side of this video game though, as I kept playing, it felt like stuff was just outright missing. Sure, I could write this off as... Oh, is that coming up on the... my wife's making some brasi bites. I don't know if that came onto the mic. Hey, while I'm sidetracked here, people from Brazil, are brasi bites an actual thing? I know they were on that Shark Tank show or something, I don't watch it, but they are quite tasty. Are they a real thing? Do people actually make those little cheese balls? I might try reverse engineering that for a cooking segment, if they are real. Sure, I could write this off as me just seeing certain things in every game ever so much that I just expect them to be there, but Skin Deep still feels like it's missing a bunch of stuff. For example, there's no character progression, at all. It's a big hang up that you get literally nothing to improve your infiltration skills or your combat skills whatsoever. Yeah, new mechanics get introduced, but that's more of a complicating factor to try and keep doing the same thing over and over again, level to level, interesting, versus allowing the player to tailor their experience to how they want to play in an open-ended level. I can't buy or bring anything with me into the commando pod before starting a mission. I can't use any of that mission income to upgrade my toolkit because I don't have a literal toolkit. I can't buy or certify into any tools or techniques that might make my job better. I can't even buy a pair of shoes so I don't start bleeding out every time I walk within 10 feet of broken glass. Which heck, I'd be happy to be a little louder if I'm wearing foot protection in exchange for not having to pick dirty glass out of my feet. We already talked about how if we had better access to loud weapons, that might just break the early and mid game being a stealth-centric game and all, but not being able to bring anything with you on a mission might upset that balance too, or at least I never found a way to bring anything onto a mission. If it was there, it was hidden very well. Noticing that you can't really upgrade anything or use any of this money you're supposedly getting to buy any tools for your jobs or do anything that might make infiltrating, taking over ships, and rescuing the cats a little more efficient makes you notice that aside from the plot moving forward, there's no real progression between missions. You start out noticing that, oh, you're just filling a milk crate with money to buy something, and then you realize that means effectively nothing because once you run out of things to buy, you just get another set of things to buy. And then when you run out of needing money for that, they literally just say screw it and you start filling up a literal progress bar to the finale of the game. There's little that changes in your habitation pod aside from if you find any cassette tapes and missions, you can use your audio player to listen from tracks in the game, and I think these little mini games here were not here during the first few missions. The most you get is a little stringboard on your wall that summarizes what happens on the last mission, provided that mission had plot relevant events in it, and this is bad enough to where before you finish the game, you notice it follows that pattern of, hey, do 2 to 4 missions that have no real plot stuff in them, get a sequence that is essentially hold W and occasionally press space for more exposition, and then you repeat this 3 times after the intro level, and then you get an endgame sequence. I know that almost all stories basically in every medium ever follow this formula, but if you can notice the formula or how formulaic a story is while you are experiencing it, maybe something needs to be altered to help the flow of that story. Okay, so about that writing. Yeah, it's witty. However, it's that kind of witty where you can tell they are trying really hard to be witty. I almost wonder if part of Skin Deep's lopsided nature can include the fact that the writing tries so hard to be cute with you that they neglected things like making the story progression feel more natural or having characters have more pronounced arcs in favor of trying to slip in jokes whenever possible. Yeah, there were some ones that made me go, oh hey, I get it. But the jokes in Skin Deep are very much the kind of jokes where you immediately notice, oh, they're trying to tell a joke here, aren't they? Yeah, I can tell the people involved in writing this game definitely have a sense of wit to them, but they never got a good laugh out of me, like an actual laugh. In fact, Skin Deep ended up getting several audible groans out of me while I was playing. Sure, I'm well aware that there are plenty of people that eat this kind of humor up, but it gets in its own way most of the time by constantly trying too hard to be funny. Something that helps a lot of funny stuff be funny in games where like there's a lot of the world is consumed through notes and messages is that almost all of these notes or messages are played totally straight. And then when you get to the note that's supposed to be funny and the punchline hits, it actually hits. When everything is trying to be a punchline, nothing is. I can't help but notice that a lot of the writing and storytelling, particularly those emails we talked about earlier, have a very bad case of that millennial writing. Like, I know my own kind when I read their prose. It's like a lot of that ironic detachment and like meeting everything in the world with like a healthy dose of snark. But I will credit them that it probably took a lot of restraint, not to mention a shock blanket. I'd also be very surprised if there was any communication between all these bit writers aside from submitting their stuff to the main writer to make sure it was acceptable for the story. The best way I can think to describe like all the little bit writing is it's like a bad improv show, like bad for improv, that is. Like there are a troupe of performers that know the basics and know how the scenes in the game works and know how to establish space work, but maybe they haven't like work together very long, so they don't have the natural chemistry they need to be an effective performing troupe. Or they're like a junior college troupe where no one has been able to just sit them down and tell them, well, yes, you are technically following the letter of the yes and rule. You are failing to grasp that the yes and rule is there to allow for a bit to become a through line by just going with the bit, like creating a scene that the audience has a reason to watch and engage with, and not so that everyone gets to have their own little bit disconnected from anything else on the stage and feel like they are the funniest guy on stage at the expense of people getting up and walking out of the theater mid-scene. Yeah. Every one of these email threads is doing their own little bit with Nina, and maybe 1 or 2 of these would have been fine if the others played it straight, or at least like not as over the top. But as it is, it feels like one of those animes where they eventually got too big of an ensemble cast because they're like several seasons in, and you're in one of those scenes where a bunch of people just stand in a line slightly angled from each other so they're all in frame, and they each say one part of a line that easily could have been a single person talking, but we need to make sure that every fan favorite character gets screen time in the episode. You know, I just realized looking at the last clip that I've had my headset on for this entire video, which I don't really need this on, although I probably should have like a monitor on. What matters is I'm not recording this video a 3rd time in a day. It's like I gotta draw the line somewhere. Let's talk about the story itself. Skin Deep has that problem where nothing seems to be taken seriously, which leads the player asking, why should I take this seriously? Sure, that intro section after we get the early game plot reveal is very reminiscent of old spy movies, but everyone is so blasé about the whole situation with Nina's new nemesis, and the world itself doesn't seem to be too serious about anything. The big bad pirates that are supposed to be ruthless and have all this high-tech gear are also just having big semi-public trade shows. Like, aren't these guys supposed to be like villains? There's never any stakes because no one ever dies, and since we know no one ever dies, as it's established right in the tutorial that all the baddies can literally respawn and the worst thing that's going to happen to the cats is that we shave them, it's like, okay, so what is the risk factor here? Like, I can respect that we're just going with the idea that cats seem to be not just sentient, but now the upper echelon of society, but I have a hard time accepting anything else in this game stakes-wise because everything is just met with snark and quips. I can understand how this is a kind of thing that might be exactly what some people are looking for, and I also concede that a lot of imsims tend to be on the grimdark side of storytelling, but I personally find this game's plot and world to just be a little too unserious to get invested in. Maybe it's because it feels like it's trying to have it both ways. Skin Deep wants to have a big plot with overarching themes, which we will get to in just a sec once we're in spoilers, but it also never wants to take itself seriously, because God forbid you aren't in on the joke. This game is very much inspired by Thief. Heck, the Dark mod is credited in the end alongside of id Tech 4, but where Thief pulls this off by having the overarching stake of the world be very grim and gritty, whereas things on a much smaller scale, like the conversations you might overhear between guards, are lighthearted and funny, everything is a potential punchline fodder in Skin Deep, from Nina's job to literally going to the bad guy convention. Nothing feels meaningful. Okay, it's spoiler time. You know what to do if you don't want them. So Nina Pasadena is an insurance commando for the spacefaring cats, and she's on a normal rescue job when she notices that the group of pirates that are attacking one of her company's clients are unusually well equipped, and that they also, specifically, are on orders to find her and kill her. Nina needs to figure out who exactly this new adversary is, and to do that she needs to run a couple missions to buy a special camera that has an absurdly large telephoto lens that lets her spy on the group of pirates' meetings from across the solar system. Nina gets said camera, and surprise, surprise, it's herself. Roll the intro credits. So that was Xena, a clone of Nina made back when she and her old partner, a cat named Little Lion, had a heist go bad, and this clone she made was trapped for 20 years in something called wonky space. I think I'm okay with there being no explanation for what wonky space is or what exactly it does to a person, but Xena doesn't seem to be too happy about it. While Nina retired from her life of crime and became an insurance commando, Little Lion kept at it, and apparently he's changed now, but we never really see enough of him to see exactly how he changed aside from the fact that he's really rich and lives in a nice house now. So now instead of doing errands to fill up a milk crate of money for a camera, we're now doing errands and missions to fill up milk crates of money to buy special tools for Little Lion and his crew, some party balloons, a special steelbook DVD, and honestly, I forgot what the third silly thing was, and I don't think it's worth checking because it's all stuff that's seemingly silly according to the initial email, but then in an email conversation, it's actually really useful in a roundabout way for Little Lion's criminal organization. And it doesn't matter because once you get them all, you get to infiltrate the bad guy convention where Xena is a keynote speaker and apparently is just this really good, unproblematic boss among all the criminals. It doesn't matter though, because you're there to put a literal bug on Xena, and the game recycles the normal thing gets comically big joke from the first major plot vignette, but this time instead of a ridiculously large camera lens, now we have a ridiculously large sandwich tray. Boo! Recycling jokes! It's not even like a rule of it's not even a rule of threes thing. There's never a third thing that gets comically huge. Okay, so now we've bugged our clone and can figure out where their hideout is and stop them from killing us, which come to think of it is Xena is trying to kill us. She's not doing a very good job. She seems more interested in running her pirate empire by attacking cat ships than she does with tracking us down. Like, we're just in our habitation pod at the end of every mission, taking jobs to help track down Xena, but aside from Xena explicitly telling her goons in the first mission that they need to keep an eye out for Nina and kill her if they come across her, Xena seems content with just raiding insured spaceships, hoping that Nina will show up, and I guess to be fair, we do keep showing up. Now do 4 missions to fill a literal progress bar. Apparently asking for the insured cats to help us with our personal errand is against company policy though, and this gets us fired at our performance review. That's completely inconsequential though, because now all these cats that we've been helping throughout the course of the game decide to help us out and we storm Xena's hideout. The only real gameplay in the finale of Skin Deep is that we need to do a mirror move puzzle to get Xena to walk into a bunch of conveniently placed swords, and then we decide that, We're just going to be friends with her now, after answering a few odd questions in a chain of emails where we were mostly assured that coming into contact with our clone will not cause the universe to end. We, merge with Xena, which goes on for so long that I finished taking my notes about the scene, noticed it was still going and decided to leave my office to refill my water, and when I came back, it was still going for a good 30 seconds. I checked my recording of this little sequence and it goes on for like 2 minutes and change. This game very much hints through the story that this is supposed to be about accepting yourself, and that Xena very much feels like she was the one abandoned by Nina, and that Nina is actually the bad clone. And it's not hard to piece together that this could very well be about how while Xena is still doing all the cool, dangerous, and illegal jobs like space piracy, and Nina is now not only lame, but the very thing that harshes the mellow of people like Xena and, who Nina used to be, Nina now has to literally synchronize with her old self because Little Lion said offhandedly that both of them are his best friend? Maybe I'm reading a little too much into this, but it feels like there were other ways this could have gone to give the player some more choice, like maybe just dealing with Xena to prove to yourself that the past is the past and that you aren't the person you used to be anymore, or how actions in another life don't just cease to exist when you start a new chapter of your life. But we went with the merge with yourself to accept yourself thing, so here we are. One transition effect later, and it's a week in the future, and we're all at the beach having a nice little party where all the cats we saved and the pirates are actually really nice the whole time, so we're just hanging out. I guess the whole synchronized thing was metaphorical because Xena is still physically apart from us and hiding behind the spaceship. The game ends with Nina offering Xena the spare room in her new ship, and then transfers you to a museum-style credits room where they clarify that while the game had a bunch of writers, most of them only worked on one email chain for a single cat each. And then we just get put back in our room where we can redo missions if we want. My final thoughts on Skin Deep is that it's a good game even if a good number of things about it rub me the wrong way. Heck, I'll even recommend it. I realized through writing this script, talking about the game, and how I saw a lot of folks who I usually don't see gushing about Immersive Sims gush over this game that, it might not be my kind of immersive sim or what I'm after. Skin Deep is a great gateway immersive sim. Sure, it's stealth-centric, leaving other facets of open-ended gameplay a little bare, but that's great for breaking the habit of just bull rushing or Call of Dutying your way through everything, and does a good job at teaching newcomers how to look for solutions to the challenges presented in games besides the most obvious answer. It also helps that this is a pretty well-polished offering compared to the stuff I'm usually showing off. That's always a plus. Like, just, okay, this isn't egregiously buggy, but I was still able to find a way to fall out of the map, which is actually kind of impressive considering we're already in space. Sure, I've got my problems with the game, but just because something is a problem for me doesn't mean that it isn't going to be a problem for you. Or, you know what I'm talking about here. Skin Deep also has decent speed game potential, with an in-game timer and a level select screen once you beat the main game, and the way you reload saves also makes it pretty easy to restart a level for individual timers. Perhaps the fact that you also start with nothing will further help it be a speed game, as there's no debate over what is and is not allowed for a start or a build because there's nothing to start with and no builds to make. Tell me if this is a game that you think you can go fast in the comments. I want to thank you all again for your patience while I figured stuff out between making sure that the aprons and the other gifts were still doable for Halloween in July in light of all the tariff stuff, and then my GPU dying on me and needing to have it replaced. I got very lucky on both counts here. I ended up being able to secure every component and tool I need to make all the aprons by myself without even needing a makerspace or to go to someone else's facility. And now on that end, I am 100% self-sufficient. And I can make them even more cost and time effectively because I don't need to go block out some time and commute over to a place and like lug my stuff around. It's all literally right here. Like, I actually got the final shipment of blank aprons. Everything's ready to go. Like, I have my design. I have, like, the aprons are sitting next to the printer, which the only reason I have not set up is because, like, with the kind of ink in that printer, once you set it up, you gotta keep using it regularly, or else, like, the ink tube things will dry out, and I don't want that. And, like, I even, in my kitchen, have a full-sized heat press, to where now I can make designs as big as, like, 13 by 19. The designs for this year's aprons are going to be literally twice the size as all the previous ones. it's gonna be great. I also, on the GPU front, I am very happy that pandemic-era Charles sprung for the extended warranty because my GPU had still 6 months left on it, meaning that I dodged a $2,000 bill, and now I am back up and running again, better than ever before, because I also did a clean install of my PC's operating system and was able to move my boot drive to an NVMe, so everything runs a lot faster. That being said, despite being lucky on both those counts, I am unfortunately not one of those huge YouTubers who can go months or even years between uploads, so these setbacks have really hit me right in the algorithm. I know I need to start cranking out videos again so that I can pay bills, and that's fine by me because that was the plan anyway. I'm even playing Dishonored on stream recently, and it's been a great time reminding myself how much of a blast that game can be. Speaking of those streams, they've let me do something that I've really been wanting to do for a while now. A lot of you tell me about all sorts of cool demos for up-and-coming imsims I should check out, and while I was unable to really justify demos being made into full videos in most cases, I made it work. Heck, Skin Deep was one of those demos. Now that I can play them on stream and still get recordings of them, and I have them on file, I can add a new part to the end of the video, the demo recommendation. This video's demo recommendation is going to be a little something called Keepsake County. In Keepsake County, you play as a professional burglar in a ruralish Midwestern setting called, Keepsake County, where you gotta steal everything that isn't nailed down and then some to help pay down some pretty hefty bills. There's a handful of missions that are preset if you like the stealth-centric gameplay of Skin Deep. You might also have a good time with Keepsake County. There's also cool buffs and other modifiers you can get between heists, and I believe a mission randomizer once you're done with all the canned heists. Also, if the frame rate looks a little choppy here, it's not the game. We streamed this when my GPU was actually starting to die, and I hadn't figured it out yet. As always, these are demos, so they're totally free to download off Steam and try out, and if you have a good time with it, consider wishlisting the game so that you'll be notified when the full version comes out. And if you'd like to see me play more cool and interesting imsim demos, I stream them over on the Purple Place whenever a video drops so that we can all play some cool demos after the video premieres. I'm not kidding, I literally, all the demos you tell me about, I've got a list of them here. Actually, I think this post-it note, if it ever focuses, I think this is actually full. I need to get an actual book or something of all the demos you tell me about. By the way, tell me about more demos. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, liking this video is great for helping me get back into the algorithm, and subscribing is a great way to make sure you get to see the next video when it comes out. And see the next weird little game I find. It costs nothing to do and helps me out a great deal. If you're able to do so and want to support me financially, I do run a Patreon over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where among all the other benefits you get for supporting me, there's early access to videos and access to the community Discord. I also post my weekly updates on Patreon for free for all to see if you're curious about what I'm up to between videos. If you aren't able to support me that way, it's totally cool because I understand that life is a little wild right now. Another way you can help me out at no additional cost to yourself is that I made affiliate over on the Purple Place, and if you have a Prime membership you aren't using, you can use it to sub to me over there and get access to the Discord and other stuff I'm trying to figure out how to integrate, but I am still very new to that other website and I'm trying my best. I swear I will get a proper overlay soon. Now let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it drawing, making MIDI music, or black and white photography, what you do should never be considered content. It is art. Content is a word that in recent years has been twisted into a means of grinding up all your skills, aspirations, and passion into a gray sludge meant for nothing more than to make a line go up for someone else's benefit. Your art in no way deserves that. Art is inalienably a reflection of its creator by the very act of creating it, and in no way do you deserve that. So get out there and fight for yourself by fighting against the contentification of everything. And stay saucy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the best idea I've ever had. So this table I originally had out to paint all your guys' aprons and stuff for Halloween and July rewards. And the Chonkalist loved sitting on it. And I realized, wait a minute, I have an old green screen that I don't use anymore. So I can put the green screen on the table, and the Chonkalist's natural urges to be a table boy will take over. And that means it's so much easier to make me pictures of you. Oh, he's all happy to see me and willing to let me pet him because I just got back from being out and he's always greeting me. Okay, maybe he's a little overstimulated now. Are you overstimulated, little guy? Are you an overstimulated green screen table boy? Oh, what a clean boy. We just applied his oil, so his skin will be extra nice. All right, I got work to do. Go on, Chunkless. It's video time.